Ever wondered what it takes to become a mummy? I'm not talking about the Hollywood movie version with curses and monsters. I'm talking about the real, ancient Egyptian process that turned kings and queens into eternal beings. What if I told you the very first step involved pulling the brain out through the nose with a hook? Stick around, because we're about to unwrap every single gruesome and fascinating detail of how the ancient Egyptians cheated death. Let's start with that brain. The Egyptians believed the heart was the center of intelligence and emotion, so the brain? To them, it was just stuffing. So, the embalmers would take a long, hooked bronze rod, shove it up the deceased's nostril, and basically scramble the brain like an egg. Then, they'd turn the body over and let the liquefied brain matter just pour out. Sometimes, they'd use a special spoon to scoop out any remaining bits. It sounds brutal, but for them, it was a necessary first step to purify the body. The now empty skull would be rinsed with wine and spices to clean it out. Imagine that being your job. With the brain gone, the real surgery began. The chief embalmer, known as the Hairy Seshta, or overseer of the mystery, would make a small incision on the left side of the abdomen. Why the left side? It was a sacred, ritualistic practice. Through this single cut, they had to remove almost all the internal organs, the stomach, the intestines, the liver, and the lungs. It was a delicate, messy job. They had to be careful not to rupture anything, especially the gallbladder, which would have been a disaster. The only organ they left inside was the heart. The heart was believed to be the seat of the soul, the very essence of a person's identity and memory. It was so important that it would be weighed against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth, in the afterlife. If your heart was heavier than the feather, your soul would be devoured. No pressure, right? So what happened to the organs they just removed? They weren't just thrown away. These organs were considered essential for the afterlife, so they were also preserved. Each organ was washed with palm wine, which acted as an antiseptic, and then carefully packed in a special type of salt called natron. This natron was the secret ingredient to the whole mummification process. It was a naturally occurring salt mixture found in dry lake beds in Egypt, and it was a powerful dehydrating agent. The organs would be dried out and then individually wrapped in linen strips. Finally, they were placed into special containers called canopic jars. Each canopic jar had a lid shaped like the head of one of the first sons of the god Horus. Imsti, the human-headed god, protected the liver. Hapi, the baboon-headed god, guarded the lungs. Duamutef, with the head of a jackal, watched over the stomach. And finally, Kebisanuf, the falcon-headed god, protected the intestines. These jars were then placed in the tomb alongside the sarcophagus, ensuring the deceased had all their parts ready for their journey into the eternity. Now, back to the body. With the organs removed, the body cavity was a big empty space. The embalmers would wash it out thoroughly with palm wine and a mix of fragrant spices. Then came the main event, the drying process. The entire body was covered, inside and out, with heaps of natron salt. Think of it like salt curing a giant piece of meat. The body was placed on a slanted embalming table and completely buried in natron for a period of 40 days. This was the most critical stage. The natron would draw out every last drop of moisture from the tissues, preventing bacteria from growing and causing decay. Over these 40 days, the body would shrink, darken, and become incredibly dehydrated and leathery, but perfectly preserved. The 40-day period was symbolic, too, linked to the time the star Sirius was absent from the night sky, a period of renewal. After 40 days, the natron was brushed off, and the body was unrecognizable. It was shrunken, stiff, and had a very distinct, leathery appearance. The empty body cavity, which had also been packed with temporary natron bags, was now cleaned out one last time. To restore a more lifelike shape, the embalmers would stuff the torso with linen, sawdust, or even those temporary natron packets. They wanted the mummy to look plump and healthy for the afterlife, not like a deflated balloon. Sometimes they'd even place small stones or onions over the eyes to give them a more rounded, natural look under the linen wrappings. It was all about presentation for the gods. The skin was then anointed with a mixture of cedar oil, wax, and other fragrant resins. This not only rehydrated the skin slightly, making it more supple, but it also acted as another layer of protection against moisture and insects. Now for the final, iconic stage, the wrapping. This was an art form in itself and could take up to 15 days. The body was meticulously wrapped in hundreds of yards of fine linen bandages. The process was incredibly methodical. First, each finger and toe was wrapped individually. Then the limbs, and finally the torso and head. Priests would recite magical spells and place protective amulets between the layers of linen. One of the most important amulets was the scarab beetle placed over the heart. This amulet was inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, imploring the heart not to testify against the deceased during the final judgment. Other amulets for strength, stability, and protection were tucked in all over the body. A sticky, black resin was often poured over the bandages, acting like a glue to hold everything together and create a hard, protective shell. As the wrapping continued, a funerary mask was placed over the head and shoulders of the mummy. For pharaohs like Tutankhamun, this mask was made of solid gold and precious stones. For others, it might be made of cartonnage layers of linen or papyrus stiffened with plastron, then painted. The mask wasn't just a portrait, it was an idealized, divine face that the deceased soul, or Ba, could recognize when it returned to the body. Without this recognition, the soul would be lost forever. Once the wrapping was complete, the mummy was placed into a series of nested coffins, like Russian dolls. Each coffin was intricately decorated with spells and images of gods to protect the deceased on their perilous journey through the underworld. Finally, the outermost coffin, the sarcophagus, was sealed. But the process wasn't over yet. The last ritual was the opening of the mouth ceremony. This was performed just before the tomb was sealed. A priest would touch the mouth, eyes, and nose of the mummy or its coffin with special ritual tools. This symbolic act was believed to magically reanimate the mummy's senses, allowing it to speak, see, and eat and drink the offerings left in the tomb. It was the final activation, the moment the deceased was fully equipped to live again in the next world. And there you have it. From a gruesome brain extraction to a sacred ceremony, the entire process took about 70 days. It was a complex blend of practical science and deep religious belief, all designed for one purpose: to conquer death and achieve eternal life. It's a testament to the ingenuity and spiritual devotion of the ancient Egyptians, and it asks why we can still look upon the faces of these ancient people thousands of years later. What an incredible legacy! Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into mummification. If you found this as fascinating as I do, hit that like button and subscribe for more journeys into the past. Let me know in the comments what ancient topic you'd like to unwrap next. See you in the next video.